Morning, everybody, and welcome to our Gloucestershire Economic Growth Joint Committee. As I was just explaining before we went live, I am having a few technical issues this morning. So if I disappear for any reason that I think Mike Dawson might pick up, but we will also be adding another agenda item to the beginning of our meeting this morning, which is to elect a new vice chair of the committee. So with that, I'd just like to, as I say, welcome you to the meeting. First item on the agenda is apologies. I've not had any apologies. Are there any apologies, Laura?
None that I'm aware of.
No apologies. Item number 2 then is the minutes of the last meeting, and this was the meeting on the 18th of November. Does anybody have any comments, questions, amendments on the minutes from that meeting? Can't see any raised hands, both digitally or physically. So we'll accept those. There are any actions from the last meeting are in the papers for information. Are we happy with those? Has anybody got any comments on any of the actions, or do we need to highlight anything? Seeing no hands. So we'll take the minutes as read then, if everybody's happy with that. Thank you very much. Next item is declarations of interest. Does anybody want to declare an interest in any of the items on this agenda? No hands whatsoever. Okay, well, I'll just drop in before we go to the rest of the meeting this additional item, which is to...
Rowena, Councillor Hay was indicating, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Rowena, I did see your hand there. Do you want to come in?
Yes, I just need to declare an interest. Obviously, I won't vote on agenda item 10. One of the bids is in from Cheltenham. I still partake, but I won't vote on it.
Okay, is that... we'll register that as an interest. Anybody else got any comments? No. Okay, then we'll go to... all right, thank you. We'll go to this... a new agenda item, which is to elect a vice chair to the committee. Does anybody want to make a nomination? We kind of need a nomination and a seconder. Has anybody got any views? In that case, Rob Bird, would you be interested in the position if I nominated you? Is Rob with us? Rob?
Patrick, that's a very kind offer. I have to say, at this moment, I am also suffering internet access problems, which is an ongoing issue. I mean, I'd accept the role, but I will make that proviso.
Okay, well, unless we have any other nominations, would anybody else like to second Rob? Do we have a seconder? A committee member, please.
Yeah, Richard Leppington has said he's happy to second.
All right, thank you, Richard. Okay, well, unless anybody has any objections, and I can't see everybody's video feed, so unless anybody has any objections, if you have an objection, make it known now. Otherwise, we'll accept that Rob Bird is the vice chair. Obviously, this will probably only be for today and one more meeting. I presume we'll be electing a new chair, or a new chair will be elected after May, or after February, is it? Anyway, we'll accept Rob as the new vice chair. So, Rob, if I do disappear, perhaps you can try and just keep the meeting moving while I rejoin. Okay, with all of that sorted out, we'll go to our first information item on the agenda, which is the Gloucestershire Economic Growth Scrutiny Committee update. And I'd like to invite Councillor Kevin Cromwell to give us a verbal update on the work of the Scrutiny Committee. Kevin?
Yes, good morning, Chair. Morning, everybody. And obviously, we are in a dismal January, but Happy New Year all the same. There's not an awful lot to report. Obviously, on your next item, item 5, you've got the Taxi Licensing Scrutiny Task Force report. I'm not going to go into anything of that. It is a very good report as far as I'm concerned. It does affect obviously the districts, and hopefully it will get it'll get some leverage where the districts may take on board some of the things that were actually highlighted. And that's obviously coming this afternoon to our scrutiny committee. It's a bit round the wrong way, but unfortunately you do meet in the morning and we do meet in the afternoon. So therefore we didn't want it to delay it any further because, as we've just said, there are only 2 more meetings to go. So it would make it very difficult to get it into the programme. So there we are. There may be some amendments from this afternoon's meeting. If there are, it will have to come back. But obviously, hopefully, we will be quite happy with it because, as I say, it's a very good report. We're also looking at social mobility this afternoon, and John, who's on this call, will be leading on that, I'm led to believe, along with Dawn Adams, who's from the Power of Three. So we will get a good report from that. So we will see, obviously, what scrutiny comes out of that. We've also got David Owen from the G1st LEP giving his update on the G1st LEP and obviously on their procedures and the way they go about things, so that we can actually try and look to see if we can't improve scrutiny there of them. And that's basically all I've got to say, unless there are any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Kevin? If you can use your digital hands, then I will see that better than any analog visual hands. No questions or comments for Kevin? Terrific. Well, thank you for that report, Kevin. And of course, Kevin is chairing the Scrutiny Committee this afternoon as well. So look forward to seeing you, lots of you there as well. We'll move on to item number 5, which is the Taxi Licensing Scrutiny Task Group report. And this is to consider the recommendations of the Taxi Licensing Scrutiny Task Group. So I'd like to invite Councillor Kate Haig to present this report. The report recommendations are for comment by the committee, and Mike Dawson may also want to come in after Kate. We'll see when we get there. Kate, would you like to present your report?
Patrick, Kate's not on yet. I have just literally spoken to her, so she's just joining, trying to join right now. I don't know if he might want to say anything first, or we just wait until Kate hopefully joins very shortly.
Should we give Kate a minute? Unless there's anything you can add at this stage, just as without stealing Kate's thunder, Mike?
Well, only in terms of procedure, I guess this is a piece of work that has been undertaken over the last few months jointly across all the authorities, with the involvement of licensing officers and licensing lead members. In terms of the way the committee might want to handle it, clearly any changes to licensing policies will be the purview of the individual licensing authorities. So it's likely the best thing to do would be to refer this back to the licensing officers group for them to take the recommendations forward. So that is probably the appropriate procedure once the committee has discussed and accepted the report this morning, Chair, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Still can't see Kate.
No, I don't think she's joined yet. I'll give her another quick ring, and if she's having any issues, then we can always delay it.
Shall we? I was going to say, shall we move on to Tim's items for growth? Well, let's. If Tim's ready, we'll wait for Kate to join the meeting, and then we'll come back to this item. So let's, for the time being, we'll go on to item number 6, which is cyber growth, and this is to receive a verbal update on cyber growth in Gloucestershire from Tim Atkins. Tim, do you want to present or give us your verbal update?
Yeah, hello. So I'm just making sure that I get my colleagues to join, so I can see Reid. You've joined. Welcome. So Reid, are you just able to get Nick on the line, and I'll just start opening the presentation, if that's all right. So the joys of virtual working. So what I'm going to do is share my screen with everybody. So if you just give me 2 seconds, hopefully we'll be able to do that. Right, here we are. So firstly, can everyone see that? Can I see? Yeah, actually Laura's nodding, thank you. So we're just going to slideshow mode. Right, and that should have gone big on the screen, is that right? Laura, can you give me a affirmative? Excellent, right, okay, thank you. So the intention today is just to give an update of where we are with the wider cyber stuff. This isn't just about Golden Valley, this is about wider Gloucestershire. And so what we're trying to do is we came back originally to December 2019, got some funding to drive not just this project, but the benefits for the wider Gloucestershire forward. And we've reported back on the findings from that. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of the key messages and then talk about where we've got forward with the project in general. So people will have seen this before, but this is just some of the powerful figures that came out of the economic work that was commissioned through Hatch. I think the big message there is that Gloucestershire has the second largest concentration of cyber sector businesses in the UK outside, well, it's the largest outside of London. And some of the numbers 6 times the UK norm for Gloucestershire, particularly in Cheltenham, obviously around some of the ecosystem there, 11 times. So that is a really powerful message and evidence that we've gained from that. But of particular importance, if you look up in the top right corner of there, where I'm doing Gloucestershire and Cheltenham, this is an issue about business growth in the last 5 years, which is huge considering, but if you actually look at the number of businesses and then compare that in growth, but you compare that to the jobs nationally in the norm, 34% of jobs increase and 40 plus in Cheltenham. So the issue there is very much this message that business, but they're just not startups that are starting and disappearing. This is real strong sustained growth benefit to the economy. So that just tells us how important this sector is to us in Gloucestershire. What else did we find? Well, we launched the Golden Valley development, which people have seen the video before and the magazine and some of the material. That really put us on a positive footing for the programme. We are now in a position where we have gone out, got a very impressive line of developers interested in consortia. So we're now down to the final bid stage of that process to bring forward Cyber Central and the Golden Valley development. So we're hoping to receive draft bids in the middle of February and final bids in March. How does this fit strategically? So obviously there are different layers of how this fits in strategically, particularly in Gloucestershire, through the local industrial strategy in the SEP. But to put a more regional and national perspective, I'm going to hand over to Reid.
Thanks, Tim. Morning, everybody. I just wanted to say it's been a real privilege and pleasure to be part of the Golden Valley team on comment from GCHQ. Last year we've done some incredible research, some incredible knitting together of the innovation ecosystem, and also exploring the not just the local but the regional and the national potential for what we have under the surface. And so we've talked about the local industrial strategy. At the national level, there's a lot that resonates with what we're doing. whether that's national cybersecurity strategy. Interestingly, central government have recognised that security and prosperity are actually intimately connected. We just need to think about 5G and, companies like Huawei and China. You cannot separate economic growth, prosperity from security, and that's coming quite strongly from the centre. And what the centre is seeing is that actually what we have in Gloucestershire is an economic engine that will really help make the UK a safer place to live and work, and also contribute to sort of building back in the sector. Very strong sector. I mean, when I go around and I talk to startups and large tech companies in Gloucestershire, they're all hiring at the moment. And it's very encouraging, given the sort of backdrop of COVID and other sectors that are struggling. So we've really got to make the most of this, and it's really heartening to see the centre starting to do this. It's not just at the national level; it's also at the international level. And we are working with the likes of DIT, Department for International Trade, on what's called a high performance opportunity via the LEP, looking at how we can get things like foreign direct investment into Gloucestershire, particularly in our sector in cyber and digital. So plenty to go on. Next slide, Tim. Just to sort of unpack that a little bit more. So we've all been through this sort of spending review, and it's a difficult time with COVID. There's also the integrated review, which is the security, defence and sort of foreign policy review. The good news is that the sort of that part of government are getting quite a lot of funding, given that we are in quite an uncertain world and there's a lot of security challenges. But on the flip side of that, that's really good for Gloucestershire. A lot of the supply chain around this sort of space are all recruiting. And so part of the challenge is going to be, skilling up and getting the right people into the sector, which I know Nick will talk about in a bit. Other things just to touch on, things like the industrial strategy coming out of Bays, DCMS, they've got an incredible brief, digital, cyber, culture, telecoms, and we tick all those boxes. In fact, Tim and I had a really good chat with one of the DDs there yesterday. They are really keen for us in Gloucestershire to make sure that we are working across government to help government with a national agenda. And so, in fact, I won't sort of go into too much detail, but when we talk to them, they're saying when they talk to the Cabinet Office, they're always asking about what we're doing. So we've certainly reached the centre, and our job really for the next year, next few months, is to make sure that we really focus on the value, carry on the research, carry on the mobilisation, and really grow this for Gloucestershire. So it's a great time to be in our sector, and I think we in Gloucestershire are well placed to do our bit for the nation and get the economic growth. Tim, back to you.
Yeah, so this is just just putting a bit of focus about why the focal part of this, and Nick's going to talk about this a little bit more, because getting that opportunity on this site right, which is really, it really is at the heart of Gloucestershire, and if you sort of expanded this slide out, we begin to see that. The connectivity with it and its location, it gives us this massive opportunity. So when people talk about innovation and in this sector, other way, and people use examples like a Dastrel Park over near Ipswich with BT and Harwell, they don't have the opportunity that we've got here because of the location and the different parts that Nick and others are going to talk about. So I think sometimes we just need to pinch ourselves and think how fortunate we are, but how are we going to exploit this opportunity? And this just gives them a little bit of background of where we are. This, we've set the bar quite high. So we're a garden community program with Homes England. They've put us onto a strategic importance footing. So it's not just this scheme. We look up at Ashchurch up in Tewkesbury and the importance of that M5 corridor. And this is something that Colin Chick and his team are looking at, is about
the future, about how do we use this corridor about the whole of the growth of Gloucestershire, and this sector is one of the key elements that will help drive that growth. We've got a real opportunity, so we put a supplementary planning document in there to raise the bar, to make sure that the stuff that we are doing is as the highest quality it can be, and the ownership interests that Cheltenham have taken are going to help with that, because you can't always rely on planning. And this is just a flashback. Even people have seen this before, but just out of just that single development, these are some of the metrics that we're hoping to get out of it. Up to almost 4,000 homes, but 12,000 jobs on site, and that resident, 11,000 new residents, and huge other bonuses in terms of council tax, in terms of new homes. They're going to be split between Cheltenham and Tewkesbury, because the site is literally split between the two. But what we want to talk about today is that attractor, that knock on, that ripple effect that it's going to have on the rest of Gloucestershire, and how we can knit that together. So Nick, over to you.
Thanks, Tim. I think the headline here is that Golden Valley can't work in isolation. It can't deliver what it can achieve, its potential in isolation. So it has to tap into the rich strengths of Gloucestershire and contribute to it. And I'll kind of touch more about that in a moment. I think you've likely to have seen this diagram of how we want to really create that core of innovation, using the academic capabilities within a stone's throw of in and around Gloucestershire, and the business community and GCHQ that we have, to really create that core as quickly as we can to stimulate that long-term economic growth. And of course that potential from a business point of view, the corporates that we've got in Gloucestershire, not just in Cheltenham, but a lot of them supplying into perhaps a customer in Cheltenham. One of the opportunities here that works at Gloucestershire level is the more we do at this level, we'll keep those corporates embedded in Gloucestershire and expand. And perhaps, a US corporate that might be based near Gloucester might bring more of their international R&D to this part of the world because of the work we're doing. So that's the opportunity. If we go on to the next slide, the kind of language you often use is about inclusive economic growth. And whilst we've done a lot of work on the innovation side and stimulating the economic bit of that, how do we make that inclusive? And actually, how do we make sure that we've got the pipeline of talent and skills and continual learning that we need to service the business community to stimulate that growth? And that will be the biggest attractor to companies relocating or growing in Gloucestershire. So one of the things we've done, and Tim will come back to it, is the concept of an attraction for citizens that achieves multiple things. We codename, if you like, the agency, which brings together some of the heritage, demystifying cyber, the hands-on science and technology, which is then inspiring for not just younger people, but that's a big part of it, but also then a user showcase for businesses and academia to test and showcase technologies, which all works in symbiosis. But the primary function is to stimulate that talent pipeline. But if we can make this of a caliber that's nationally relevant, that helps Gloucestershire as an attraction in its own right. Next slide, I think, is back to Reid.
Yeah. So again, as part of the work that we've been doing over the last year, it's been amazing to find members in the ecosystem already doing stuff and mobilizing them. And yes, there's a lot in Cheltenham, but actually it goes way beyond into Gloucestershire. So if we take Cynam, for example, the cyber cluster that represents the local businesses and organizations, that was originally constituted for Cheltenham, but it's become increasingly focused on Gloucestershire and businesses and organizations and schools all over the county. We've got Hub 8, again, that's the new cyber co-working space in Cheltenham. But some of the companies that in there actually are, as Tim alluded to, actually have facilities all over Gloucestershire. So if we take, for example, Capita, Capita, I don't know if you know, but they actually own the Fire Services College in Moreton and Marsh. And they are really keen to look at how they can do work in cyber, particularly in Moreton. So again, that's in Gloucestershire, and really interesting opportunity there. We've got companies like CGI they have their innovation centre in Gloucester Business Park, and again, they're really interested in how they can sort of grow the connections across Gloucestershire. Babcock, they've got an innovation centre in Tewkesbury. Again, they also want to be part of Golden Valley, and really this is about growing those networks and looking at, as we scale, how do we have the capacity across Gloucestershire to work this. And of course, it's not just the corporates. We've got startups. We've got community organisations like Ladies of Cheltenham Hacking Society. Who knew about that? But then it's how do we bring in other sort of sectors. So we've got a strong agri-tech in Gloucestershire. I was just talking to somebody this morning about biosecurity and how that's going to grow as we go forward. Cheltenham Science Centre, and there's plenty of other stuff that is already happening, and we've got that opportunity, I think, to really stimulate things across Gloucestershire. Next slide. What we've been doing as well is doing a bit of homework to look at what we already have in the region. What's the sort of situational awareness for these things, and how can we work across those different stakeholder groups for that maximum value? And this just gives you a glimpse of the sort of work that we're doing in the background. Okay.
We touched on the kind of national and international perspective, and this is really, really important to position the Gloucestershire cyber capability and the broader innovation ecosystem, because it bleeds outside of cyber as not only nationally relevant, but of international significance. And so we're working with, and we need to do a lot more with the LEP on putting together this, as we referred to, the high potential opportunity of the Gloucestershire cyber capability as a destination, so that Gloucestershire is a promoted destination for internationally and nationally for companies to grow into or relocate to, and actually that's quite complex. We can't just put a few bullets together. There's some work to do to make it compelling. And what we need to make sure is that this doesn't then become something that's competing either within Gloucestershire or within Western Gateway or with it nationally, but it's complementary to the UK because it's a much stronger proposition than that. So that's why we need to do some more work with the LEP and other stakeholders to pull that together. Next.
And if I can just sort of come in on this one. So one of the things that we've recognised as we've been doing quite a bit of work is the need for an underpinning digital strategy across the county. Now, it's not really our job to lead this, but actually we are in a good position to at least initiate it and to get it going. And what I mean by digital strategy, yes, it's about things like broadband and infrastructure, but it's also about making the most of the data and information that we have for citizens across the county. Digital services, placemaking. You will hear a lot about smart cities, but what does that actually mean? And then, we can go into various different services, whether that's health and social care, social housing, communities and families. So if we're going to do Golden Valley well, we really need to sort of get our digital strategy as a county sorted. So there's an opportunity to build this now and really put the citizen at the heart of the information. This is happening elsewhere in the UK, but we really need to monitor on this. And there's plenty of material out there, but we've just got to work in the right way to make it sort of fit for Gloucestershire's needs. So that's sort of digital strategy. And then, thinking about where else does this sort of thing happen elsewhere. So San Diego is just to give you an example of a city in the US where they've been doing smart cities, but also they've got a really interesting sort of ecosystem in their region. They've got some, lots of interesting academic stakeholders. They've got government, and cities like San Diego are really leading the way on this. They're looking at it from a sustainability perspective. So we can learn from other places around the world. Not that we want to copy them, but that we do our own thing in Gloucestershire. So plenty of inspiration.
So thanks, Rick. So I can just add into that. We talk about the city region for Gloucestershire, and there's an item about a perspective for that, a scope for that, and I suppose what's the uniqueness about our city region, and I think this can play into it, because on one hand, if we are so strong in this sector and we've grown this sector, it's important that we're able to present ourselves as somewhere that is a smart city region. And I know we're quite a long way away from that, but this is a real opportunity for us to start focusing on how we can be perceived and how we're promoting ourselves.
And then the last thing I would want to mention is that, outside of sort of central government, we have an opportunity to grow things like the media and marketing. And so you've probably seen the video that we produced last week on what is cyber skills and so on. These are the sort of things that we can do, and it's fundamental. I know Nick's going to hopefully talk a bit about the skills agenda, but that is really at the heart of the growth. We've got to get not just young people, but a diverse set of people into the sector. So plenty of opportunities for engagement.
So this is just a little bit of a summary about some of the things that have been happening in the last 6 months, and I think I will speak around it, but maybe the Dev or others can talk about how the impact of the industrial strategy and the CEP and the sort of birth of what happened as we launched the Golden Valley. There's been a real awakening and an interest of the importance of this sector and how it affects the whole of Gloucestershire. So when the bids came out for the Build Better or Getting Building Fund, as it was renamed, 4 out of 5 of the schemes that were funded were about cyber and the importance of with the recognition of that importance to the economy. I think 12 out of the 16 long listed ones had a direct connection to that sector as well. So we've seen a big impact. I mean, really great to see the forum coming forward. So the comms that went round with the funding agreement that's just been launched, the planning application submitted in that, again, really powerful message for Gloucestershire. But it just doesn't stop there. The opportunities that sit around that are all around all of the districts. We've all got a stake in this. And how that fits in with that overarching national strategy that Reid's been talking about. It is not often that we get to stretch in, and we've got people from Cabinet Office actually asking directors of DCMS, is it what's happening with Gloucestershire? It's a real positive message for us. So over to you, Nick.
Thanks, Tim. So the huge opportunity we've got here is to bring together and build on what we've already got, which is, as we know, GCHQ and potentially other agencies, this rich academic capability, which I'll touch on in a second, and the corporates that exist. And that's not just in Cheltenham. Apple, for example, are in Bishop's Cleeve, and there are others. So building on that, kind of surfacing some of that, the existence of some of those, and also growing the startup community, which is strong but could be better. All of those, of course, are dependent on a talent pipeline, which we've touched on. So we are, a long way ahead of other places that in terms of this capacity. So we've got to build on that, and if we get that right, it creates something quite special. But it can only work at the Gloucestershire level, which I'll come to. If you click again, Tim, and just touching on the academic capability, just on the research side, obviously there's the teaching side, which I haven't mapped here, but the connectivity we have into the UK research base is significant. And just to touch on the shaded area, UE, Gloucestershire, Cardiff, Bristol, Bath, and University of South Wales, we've pulled together as a research and innovation stakeholder group chaired by University of Gloucestershire to help steer and make sure that the Golden Valley has the right core. And if we go on to the next slide, Tim, this is work in progress, but it lays out how we think we can join up across the county with there's a short-term focus on Golden Valley at the moment, and the research and innovation stakeholder group that I've mentioned feeds into the Cyber Leadership Board, and there's a skills and talent stakeholder group that brings public sector and private sector together, including Berkeley Green in Stroud District Council. And what's interesting there with both those groups, we've kind of been able to bring them above the competitive level and work for this common goal, whether it's skills pipeline or research activity. But the opportunity here, of course, is to get this to help across the county. And one of the things we want to do is to pull together a community of practitioners, community of practice, if you like, of the relevant innovation assets across the county, whether that's Berkeley Green, the Forum, we're already talking to the Reef group, Cirencester Hartbury, and so on, because that's the way we can really leverage the opportunity, share best practice, share contacts, share ideas, build the capability. And again, talent is going to be the biggest thing for us. It's the biggest attractor, but it's the area we need to put the most work into. And if we work together on that, we've got a much greater chance of achieving success. Tim. You're on mute, Tim.
You've got to happen in the end. So, yeah, we're working across a much wider area to grow this. And I think the summary, there's some of the elements that we're covering. It's reaching into central government. It's thinking about driving forward a digital strategy and how we present ourselves. And I think that the importance of this is just growing and growing, and particularly with the wider economic challenges. This still very much seems to be a growing sector, and something that the benefits are just going to become stronger. So we have, just to summarise, we've got a proposal in as part of paper later, which is a bid to the CDIF business rates pool, to sort of extend that work. And obviously, my colleague, the two colleagues on the call here, part of the funding that we got funds the ability of the specialist team that we've developed to help us go out, and I think very much a collaborative proposal is determined to enable us to lead that work with the team that we've got, but work closer with the LEP to help us, develop that compelling narrative and dedicate some time to help us move this forward, just to make sure that we can make the most of this. So that sort of summarises that. So, I mean, that's the end of our presentation. And I just wondered whether, Chair, there were people wanted to ask questions, or if there was anything that was directly relevant to the guys I've got working, so Reid and Nick. Possibly it's an opportunity for them to ask any questions, or if anyone had any issues about that bid. So I don't know whether, Andrew, I know you're on the call, whether you want to do that now, or whether we want to pick that all up later on. So that's an open question. So I will leave you there and hand over to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Tim, and Reid and Nick as well. Excellent presentation once again. I did love the bit about being the cradle of cyber tech innovation. Fantastic. Anyway, as you can see, I've put another lump of coal into the boiler, and I'm trying my video. If it seems to be working, but if there are any problems, please shout. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Tim, Reid, or Nick on the presentation? John McGinty, you've got your hand up. John.
Thanks, Chair. I didn't know whether or not to make this comment under item 10 or now, but I'll make it now. I mean, I'm desperately keen for Gloucestershire to have a digital strategy. And I've had a conversation with Reid about this earlier this month, and I think it's something we've been lacking for a while, and I've been saying this for a while. But I wasn't convinced that developing that digital strategy on the back of this cyber bid is the right way to go about it, or the right forum to develop it. So I suppose it's a comment I made last time when we were discussing the Cyber Central, and asked the question about what's the difference between cyber and digital. And I think there is a very big difference between cyber and digital. And I'm not sure developing a digital strategy through the Cyber Central mechanism, or even through the Cybertech LEP group, which I sit on, is the right forum, if you'll excuse the pun, to sort of develop that. Gloucester City already has a digital strategy. I don't know if we're the only district in the county to have one, but we already have a digital strategy which sets out the ambition of the city to be the best small smart city in the country. And yet I know that Gloucester City doesn't actually sit on any of those groups directly that are sort of developing the Cyber Central proposition. So I was just going to pull out in that proposal for a bid later on, is there a better forum? I just wonder if there's a different grouping we need to establish to develop the digital strategy, rather than just piggy-tailing it on the back of a cyber growth strategy, which is, to me, is something very different. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, so there's a lot of echoing. Is everyone on mute? So I agree, and I don't think we're ever. I think our intention here is to get some momentum behind this, because I think it's an issue that's been flirting around for some time. And I think our view is that I feel this is an opportunity for us, particularly when we're talking about stuff about city region and the identity of the city region, about how we move that forward. I think our intention is to get some momentum behind that, and if people feel that one of the actions from that is to take if there is some budget that sits around, some indicative to help us move that forward, and maybe the people, we have representation in helping that move forward. I would quite agree. I mean, our interest is to get this moving, because at one hand we don't want to be kind of left behind in terms of how we're promoting Gloucestershire. And I think it would really be important for us to have this in place if we are, selling ourselves as, quite a tech leader, not just nationally but internationally. So I'm more than happy to take that, because there are others, as you would say, better place to lead that. But really, our intention was to get some momentum into it.
Yeah, thank you, John and Tim. I think, John, you've probably got a very good point. But in some respects, all of these things also do need to be joined up. Anyway, we've got Rob Bird. Rob, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Tim, I hope you'll forgive me for this, but I was intrigued by a comment you made, and bearing in mind that obviously a lot of the associated housing to this whole area of development is in Tewkesbury's area. I just wondered, you said something along the lines of very early on in your can't rely on planning, and I was intrigued to know what you were thinking of when you said that. I mean, that might have been a throwaway remark, but it did intrigue me, Tim.
Yeah, so very much. Obviously, if we want to set the standards of greatness and what we're trying to achieve, sometimes planning can only be used too far, and those are probably around will have suffered the scars of us trying to achieve something great with the development, and then the housing 5-year supply is used against us about instead of bringing something forward for employment, it ends up get used for housing. We're constantly challenged, and we aren't in control of the rules there. So even with the supplementary planning document that both authorities, Tewkesbury and Cheltenham, have put up there, which is a really ambitious, setting the bar high, it's not the strongest tool in the box. Sometimes that's why you need to have ownership, because that's really the only will that you can really control the things that are going on the ground. So it was really just that, Rob, and nothing else. It's just, if you really want to strive for, particularly something like, the carbon neutral agenda, or pushing it that far, planning has severe limitations in that area.
Sorry, yeah, it was about ownership. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Rob. Should we just go back to John's comment, though? Is there a piece of work we need to do to ensure that the strategy is in the right place and the makeup at all? Is this something, Tim, you'll take away? Or
yeah, look, I'm really happy to do that, and obviously not precious about this at all. And you know, I think a lot of this is also taking the burden. Sorry, the burden, you know, necessary off us. I think it would be great if you know, if we can actually get agreement that we need to drive this forward, and then we take it away and maybe discuss at the SOG, you know, how we actually lead that, who needs to take it control, and absolutely fine with me. I'd just like to see some momentum behind it because I think it's really important for Gloucestershire.
Okay, great. Well, unless anybody's got any issues, then perhaps John and Tim, you can take that back with SOG and just make sure we've got everything in the right place.
Chair, it's Mike.
Mike, yes, come in.
I think I've got my hand up. I'm not quite sure.
Yes, you have now. Right. I think you took it down.
Okay. Thank you for that. I was going to make the similar comments under the bid later on. And when we do, perhaps I could suggest more or less what Tim has suggested. I think there are some key issues around the digital strategy that John has mentioned around it needs proper scoping. We need to know what it is and what it's going to cover. It'll be different in detail in different areas depending on the nature of the area that it's covering. So, and the danger is with the digital strategy ends up trying to do lots and lots of things and not being properly focused. So I think we can talk about that later on. But I think certainly the suggestion that that any approval of that funding later on is subject to the development of a scope and governance arrangements, and that might be through the senior officers group. But I'll talk more about that later on. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mike. Okay.
Chair, Patrick, can I just flag one thing, just in relation to that point?
Yes, go on, Tim.
Yeah, so I mean, I think part of the stuff that we were talking around the digital strategy is also that when we take us back to the slide about smart city, and it's about this smart city region and some of the joining up, and I think it is really connected to that wider digital strategy. But it's I suppose us possibly having a bit of an understanding about what the potential is for Gloucestershire around that sort of smart city technology. So I'm keen for us to pursue that in some way, and I don't think we need to discuss it here. But just, you know, that's all part of the bigger picture of about stuff that we're looking at as part of the Golden Valley site. But you can't just create one site as a smart, you know, with smart city infrastructure. It's generally much bigger than that. So I think that's another part of the point. So if everyone's comfortable, we'll pick that up as part of the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Tim. All right, does anybody else have anything on this particular item, although I think there's a few issues that will be picked up in other items in a minute. Okay, on that basis then, we'll thank you, Tim, as I said, and Reid and Nick for your presentation this morning. We'll now go back as Kate has joined us. I'm just double checking she's still on the... Yes, still here, Kate. Nice to see you. So we'll go back to item number 5, which is the Taxi Licensing Scrutiny Task Group report, and I'll ask Kate to present her Scrutiny Committee's report. Kate. Are you there, Kate? You're on mute if you are, Kate. Oh. I know you're not, but we can't hear you. Anybody know if Kate's... Do you know if Kate's there, Laura?
I think she might be delayed. I think she might be having some IT issues. She looks frozen to me.
Is she? Are you there, Kate? Oh, Kate, I can see you. Are you there? Katie, are you? We still can't hear you. Yeah, I think you've still got.
Apologies for the slight technical issues earlier. So, thank you. We started this task and fish. Oops. Sorry. I'm not.
Yes, but you are breaking up a bit, Kate.
Yeah, I'm told that I'm just going to. I'm swapping. I've swapped devices. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, but there is an echo. Have you got two devices?
Yeah, hold on. Let me just. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes, that's great. Brilliant.
Right. Okay. Sorry. I'm unfortunately I was trying to use the county council's device and.
I might be a connection more than your device. Hello, Kate. You've gone again. I tell you what, while we try and get, maybe Kate needs to redial in. If you can hear me, Kate.
I can hear you.
Try without your video on.
Right. Right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. Hopefully that will be the last of the teething issues. No, thank you for inviting me to present this. I know it hasn't been to scrutiny, that'll be there this afternoon, but it's been a long time in the making up this report. In fact, we started well before anyone had ever heard of COVID. The reason we wanted to do this was to look at those cross-cutting issues between districts and the county in relation to an industry that's very important in the county, which is taxis and private hire. And it's important for a number of reasons, not only because of the economic benefits of having a good and thriving taxi and private hire service, but also the climate benefits, reducing the need for car usage, making it easier for people who can't drive or don't want to drive to get around the county, as a sort of as an enhancement of our public transport network, a whole range of issues. And also we were aware of the fact that the industry is changing and the introduction of things like app-based hires and some of the benefits, especially for customers, but also the risks in terms of things like community safety. So there were a whole range of issues we wanted to look at and explore, and certainly, I'm very thankful to the members and also to the officers who gave their time to look at these issues and come up with the recommendations before you. There are alarming stories out there with cross-authority licensing, where if a driver loses their license in one authority, they can often go to another neighbouring authority or an authority in another part of the country and get a license there because of differing standards. So we wanted to try and tackle that, because that is something we felt was important to see Gloucestershire as a whole in terms of trying to avoid that kind of instance. There's a recommendation in the report to sign up to the National Register of Revocations and Refusals for the county, but also for all the districts as well. And that is because if there is an issue with the driver, it's a very quick way of just flagging that up, so that across the country, licensing authorities can say, oh, what is the issue with this driver? Why was this refused or revoked? And then make decisions based on having all the evidence in front of them. It's really important in terms of protecting the public and also protecting drivers as well, making sure that the right information is out there about them. I've talked about community safety. There's also mentioned the climate change agenda and how taxis and private hire can reduce private car usage, but also there's a real ambition, especially amongst members, but also some of the districts, to convert the fleet. I mean, it will happen eventually, but to move more quickly to converting the fleet to electric vehicles. There's a role the county has to play there in terms of providing things like charging points. I won't ask you to guess how many electric charging points are at taxi ranks in the county, but it's a number less than 2 last time we asked. So there's real work to do there. I think, unless there are any questions, I'm going to leave it at that. I just think this is
it's a small corner of local authority business in some ways, but it's really important. Nearly everybody in the community has some experience of using taxis or private hire vehicles. The county council relies on it for transporting school children. Some of our most vulnerable population rely on these services. So I think getting it right in terms of being consistent, making it possible for businesses to be viable, especially post-COVID, and getting that public safety agenda is absolutely critical, but also a real issue here where we can tackle some of our climate change targets as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kate. This is also, as they go into the scrutiny committee this afternoon. Does anybody have any comments? I'll make a comment first. I would say, certainly in the rural areas like the Forest, a good, reliable, safe taxi sector, if you like, is vitally important. I know I've had kids who've used local taxis a lot as they were growing up. And I would say that actually my experience has been fantastic of all the local taxi companies, certainly in the Forest. But I think this is a very important subject, and I think the idea of making sure it's a county-wide approach is, I would think, probably a very good idea. Does anybody have any comments? Rob Bird.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, at the end of the day, the decisions will be made by an individual licensing committees, and that's fine. But I would make a couple of comments from a Tewkesbury perspective. This whole, when I read the report, it does seem very Gloucester City centric. And, if I look at the survey responses that are both taxi drivers and public, they are mainly related to Gloucester City. To some extent, I think Stroud with taxi drivers, across the public responses, it's very limited other than Gloucester City. And as far as Tewkesbury is concerned, there doesn't seem to be much emphasis on addressing the thoughts and needs of either our taxi drivers or our customers. That's one comment. The other is, I mean, from our point of view, I think it links in some ways to what you've just said, Chair. You know, the thing as far as taxi services in our part of Gloucestershire are concerned, affordability, and actually the affordability thing comes out in the overall public survey of, I think it was 85%. No, 95%, sorry, of customers are looking at affordability as being the most important issue. But anyway, affordability and availability are the key issues for us in a borough that covers a wide area. And at the moment, I don't see much in this report to address those key issues, which are, at the end of the day, this is an economic growth committee, and this is a report to an economic growth committee. So, those key issues that don't seem to be addressed very significantly, as far as my bit of the world is concerned. So I would make those comments. Signing up to the register on, I think it's NR3, so that we can all cooperate is fine. I mean, that's in progress anyway, as far as Tewkesbury is concerned. And there are other areas where we can usefully cooperate. Yeah, as I said, the report seems a little light as far as my bit of the world is concerned. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Kate, do you want to come back on that? You're on mute. Are you there, Kate? We can't hear you, Kate. You're not on mute, but we can't hear you. Try. Well, I tell you what, while Kate tries to reconnect with audio, Rowena, Councillor Rowena Hale. Rowena, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come in?
Thanks, Patrick. I've just got a couple of questions and a couple of comments, if I may, please. I welcome a consistent approach across the county in terms of licensing and our taxi drivers in particular, because of the potential safeguarding issues. I think the NR3 is really important for us all to do. I enjoyed reading the paper, and as much as I'm very clear that it's been a collaborative piece of work involving our licensing members and officers. The questions I've got are, who's going to coordinate the recommendation within this, and who's actually going to pay for this piece of work? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you much, Rowena. Kate, are you there yet at all? Yes, go on.
Good. I'm just not not gonna mute myself again. I think that's the answer. But on those questions, Councillor Bird talking about the rural areas, because there are far fewer taxis and private hire vehicles in those rural areas. I think that was one of the reasons why there wasn't such a response. Clearly, Gloucester and Cheltenham, who we had quite good responses from actually, have a very organised trade. And so I think there's some coordination there. But we were very keen to look at and did spend a lot of time looking at rural issues. And in fact, one of the reasons why we've not been somewhat firmer in our ambitions to bring common standards together, and also to look at some of the climate change stuff like electric vehicles and vehicle standards and age of vehicles, is because of representations by officers in the trade that would be unviable for them. So, if Gloucester City had been running right through this agenda and getting everything it wanted, we would have far more stringent targets. And actually, this shows that this cross-district and county group has actually taken into consideration those factors. So, I'm sorry that Councillor Bird doesn't see that in the report, but that is the issue. Those are the issues that we looked at. So, where you've got one taxi rank in the Cotswolds with 2 spaces in it, compared to urban centres, we tried to balance across that the requirements of this report. In terms of who coordinates it, there is a recommendation in the report that there's an annual meeting between the various licensing committees and the county and GLOG, just to make sure that this work and members understand the work that's being done. I think that was an issue in some districts, that members perhaps didn't have the engagement and involvement in taxi and vehicle licensing that other members did in other districts, and I think that was an interesting point, and this would go some way to balancing that out and making sure we've got something across the piece. In terms of where's the economic development in this, I think it kind of underplays how hugely important at the moment this is to the economic development of the county. In terms of, it can be difficult to get around. This is a really important, as you said, Chair, really important for many people, especially younger people, but also people with disabilities and older people, in having a sustainable lives in our rural areas. And it's not just about going out when we can to a restaurant or whatever on a Saturday night. It's actually, for some people, the way they get to work, it's the way they access education. It's the way they access health services. So it's a hugely important underpinning of our economic growth as a county, that we are absolutely up there and at the forefront of having the best possible standards, so people feel they can travel safely around our county. And the future will bring more electric vehicles. The future will certainly bring the use of apps. We've already got app-based providers in the county, certainly at certain points in the year, but they do come into, and they are licensed out of county. And I think we really need to be considering what that means for us in terms of community safety. So those are the answers to the questions I've had so far. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Kate. I think Rob probably wants to come back, but before we do, Rob, Doina, you've had your hand up. Do you want to come in, Doina?
Thank you. Less of a question and a comment, and I think thank you for bringing that and the work that's done. And I know Stroud District obviously inputted. It's good to see good response back from the taxi drivers, not so much from the public. But I think it's although I think the report obviously indicates in some of the comments so far that this is very much a local issue, and it's pretty much driven by the sorry, that's a really bad pun, but by the districts. It's good to have that overview across the county. So I just want to say thank you for that work haven't happened. I did get some response back from the officers who've been leading on this, and I think those recommendations went back to our licensing members and officers already, and I think they're very happy with those. I mean, I think a couple of points I would just make. I think it's really good to raise more awareness of taxis and the role they do play. And I just want to echo what Kate's saying is around, particularly for younger people or anyone who doesn't drive, getting a taxi at the end of the day home from work, for example. If you work, I mean, when we get back to the sort of having those businesses open that run after public transport has ended for the day, can be extremely valuable, can be the difference between whether you can do a job or not if you haven't got someone to give you a lift home at the end of the day at 2 o'clock in the morning or something. So if you're, so those sorts of things. So I think there is a really important role for them to play in supporting the local economy. I think it's interesting as well around the electric and green vehicles. If you think about London, where basically you've got the penalties in place if you drive a vehicle that's got high emissions, nearly all of, certainly in the black cabs are now moving in that direction, but all of the Uber cabs have been hybrids for a very long time. If you go to London, you'll see how many there are. So perhaps there's something that can be done there around how do we support moving in that direction, which I think also be really good. I mean, I think it's just a good piece of work. And I'm also pleased to see they're sort of obviously looking at safeguarding and how we ensure there's consistency across the board on that, and I think learning from good practice and just checking it's consistent, because I think that's where people will raise concerns. And so I think it's just a good piece of work, and it's a little bit of a different one for us to look at this committee, but I think it's a good one that we've had an overview of. And obviously I'll take it back to our members and officers and look at it and just check we're doing some of the stuff in there that has been recommended.
Terrific, thank you, Dinah. Bob, do you want to come back in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you've heard Councillor Haig's responses to my comments, and I think it's important for me to make a few further points. But obviously, I don't want to. We could end up arguing about this all day, I suspect. As far my point was that this appeared to be very Gloucester City centric. Her response to that was, well, we had a good response from Cheltenham and Gloucester. Well, the response from taxi drivers in Cheltenham was zero. And as far as the rural taxi services are concerned, she rather eloquently illustrated my point entirely. This is about people being able to get about and move about and afford. I go back to my point: affordability and availability. Well, I'm afraid what we've got in front of us here doesn't really address those issues at all. And I'm intrigued by the comment. Actually imposing regulation on taxi operations in rural areas would make taxis unviable. So it's actually going in exactly the opposite direction to affordability and availability, and of course making lives more sustainable. But clearly we're going to come at this from very different perspectives. She lives in Gloucester City, I live in a rural area. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. One comment I would say is I think this is a perennial problem we all have, and that is how to engage people in consultations. I think a personal view is people are inclined to engage in consultations when they have a very, very strong point or have had a particular issue. If you're generally happy, you don't bother. And in some respects, that's what councillors are there for, to represent the views of those who are quite happy with things, but obviously would like to see things differently. But yeah, trying to get engagement in consultation is an ongoing issue with all of these things. But anyway, Kate, do you want to just come back quickly to Rob? Because obviously this is going to the committee later this afternoon as well.
Yeah, as I said, we did take very strongly into account the rural issues. In fact, we had a long session with Councillor Moore about the ambitions to provide services for the county council, taking people to public transport connection points, and how rural taxis could play a role in that, and that would make those businesses, which they are in rural areas, much more sustainable. So that didn't come into a recommendation in this report because it's a piece of work that Councillor Moore is doing with his cabinet member climate change hat on, and we wanted him to go away and gather his evidence and do his work. But we did consider it very carefully, and as I said, and that is why we didn't make recommendations that actually would make those businesses in rural areas less viable by going at the pace that Gloucester City or Cheltenham Town perhaps wanted to go at. So this is a balance, but we all know, and I'm sure Councillor Bird knows, as chair of the the environmental scrutiny, that this is the direction we're heading in anyway, and that vehicles will become electric, and it's about how we as a county support them. So that's why we had discussions about charging points, etc. So as with everything, he made it to the recommendations, but I hope you will support the report.
Okay, well, thank you, Kate. I've got Mike Dawson. Mike, did you want to come in? Wherever you are.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was only about process. I'm not quite sure Kate was in the meeting when you asked me to just give a bit of an overview of that. But clearly, from that point of view, I think actually this is the first time, Kate will correct me if I'm wrong, that we've actually brought licensing lead members together across the county. The licensing officers obviously have a group that meet and discuss issues, but through this piece of work, I think the scrutiny task group certainly looked and worked with the lead members for licensing in each of the district councils. So there has been input from all of the districts into this piece of work. But it is the first time, I think, that we've done this piece of work. So in some ways, I think that in itself is a good step forward. I think the only comment that clearly, I think members' comments about the adoption of the various standards and the actions here will be the responsibility of the individual licensing authorities. So that will be down to each of the districts to determine how they deal with it. And therefore, those issues that have been raised by members in terms of affordability, availability, and all those other issues will be something that can be taken up on a district by district basis to make sure that whatever the policies are, they work for the individual authorities. So we can do that. The licensing officers group will work, as far as I'm aware, this is the proposal, to coordinate the actions arising from this work. What I was going to suggest, that the Chief Exec's group just take that away. I'm not taking anything away from the licensing officers group, but it might well be that we want to appoint a senior lead officer from either a director level or one of us, just to make sure the work is coordinated through that group. The licensing officers group does vary a little bit in terms of the level of officers. So the chief execs might like to just take that away and work out, have we got the right representation there, just to make sure that we keep the ball rolling and we take all those issues into account. And I think the licensing officers group chair can pick up the points that have been made this morning by all members around the variety of the county and the need to make sure that the policies we adopt work wherever they are adopted. So that, just in terms of process, Chair, that those are the comments in terms of if the committee is minded to accept the report and the recommendations, how we would take it forward at officer level. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. That's good. Rowena, you've put your hand up again. Do you want to come back in, or very briefly, though, please?
Very briefly, sir. I actually wanted to say thank you for that, Mike, because one of my issues were the part of my question in terms of who's going to take that forward is who's going to be the lead in that. So actually taking it away to put a senior officer sort of looking at that is very reassuring. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to thank you, Kate, for presenting the report. We haven't got any more comments. As a committee, we've just been asked to comment on the recommendations before it goes to the meeting this afternoon. And I think we've got a good range of comments there, which, as Mike said, have been taken on board. So thank you very much for all of that. Thank you very much once again, Kate. And yes, a very interesting subject as well. Right, we'll move swiftly on then to item number 7. And this is strategic planning. And this is our statement of common ground. Mike, do you want to present this report?
It's one of those occasions, Chairman, where I say, no, I don't. And that's not because I don't particularly want to present it, but we have Tracy Cruz here from Cheltenham, and Tracy and David Oakhill, one of her colleagues, have done a lot of work on this report with planning officers, strategic planning officers from across the county. So I would very much prefer, if you wouldn't mind, Chair, to ask Tracy to present this report. Thank you.
Yeah, much as we love the sound of your voice, Mike, Tracy would be a very pleasant change. Tracy, do you want to come in?
Happy to, thank you. And apologies, Chairman, I haven't got my camera on. I've got home learning going on in the background, which I don't think you want to see. So I think trying to keep it short, really, because there's still work to do on this. And what I would stress is this is the start of the conversation. So just as a bit of background for those who might not have been engaged earlier on in the process. So this work was produced at the request of this committee, and some of you will be aware that we appointed a consultant to do this piece of work, John Baker, and he was heavily working his way around all the different partners, getting points of view, understanding what was happening in their localities. So there was about 18 months worth of work. That contract then came to a close, and the latter stages have been picked up by our own planning officers, and they've been working across the local authority areas, but together with partners as well. COVID has had implications on the timeline, so really you should have received this piece of work before now, and our apologies but we have had some resource commitments to deal with. Leaders have been engaged, as I noted, and some of you will remember there was a workshop event in Hynham at the end of 2019 where we did a lot of the mapping work, and then there was subsequent engagement by the Leaders Board together with informal engagement with the local authorities separately. So what you see before you today is a document that's actually a culmination of all the partner organisations, and it really serves two purposes. And one is to meet the requests that were set by this committee, which was a request to want to work collectively across Gloucestershire on strategic planning. But also it looks to meet the National Planning Policy Framework requirement of cooperation. And as we know, there's lots of changes in the offing in terms of planning reforms, etc. But we will still want to work collectively together. So this is the starting point for that. It's not the end of the process. I see this very much as the beginning of the process and that engagement across the county. So what you've got in the recommendations to the report are essentially two. One is to endorse the draft Statement of Common Ground. And then secondly is to develop an action plan and a programme of work to resolve and reach agreements across the county, and that would be brought back to this committee. However, I am very conscious that due to, it's not only officers that have been having to deal with COVID implications and the resourcing of that. I'm very appreciative that chief execs and leaders have been very much kind of heavily involved in the response as well. And some of you might have not had the full opportunity to engage with your officers or to fully review the detail. So I'm suggesting that committee might wish to amend that first recommendation. So the recommendation is to endorse. My suggestion is that we accept the report before you today and we refer it to the Leaders Board, and that would give us the opportunity for the leaders across the county to drill into a little bit more detail of what's in the report, to make sure that we all feel comfortable with what it's setting out. And that discussion would happen before being passed to the 7 local authorities in Gloucestershire to consider and approve the Gloucestershire Statement of Common Ground. Clearly, we can have a note coming back to this committee, and then obviously the second part of the recommendation would still be valid and live. So a very quick summary. I'll stop there. Happy to receive any questions.
Thank you, Tracy. And yes, I was aware that there might be a slight amendment to the recommendations. Robert, are you going to come in and expand on that?
Chair, it's Mike. Just a point of clarity, if I could, for members. And just Tracy mentioned the Leaders Board, but I'm conscious that the Leaders Board hasn't met, although those of you who did go to Hynham for that workshop will not have forgotten it, and those who were there will remember why it was there. It was like camping in winter, I seem to recall, but there we go. But just so that members are aware, because not everybody's there, the Leaders Board was actually established by this committee to provide a forum for leaders and lead members on planning to have informal discussions around the Statement of Common Ground. So by referring it to the Leaders Board, that's the board we're actually talking about, or Tracy's talking about this morning, Chair. It does exist within your governance, and therefore it's just a question of providing a forum for further discussion around the detail of what's in the Statement of Common Ground. Thank you, Chair. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you, Mike. And I think you're absolutely right. We did set up the Leaders Board for this purpose. So I think we need to use the Leaders Board for that extra bit of clarity and a bit of detail. Rob, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, thank you very much to Tracy and all the officers who've worked on this, because it is such a substantial piece of work, as is evidenced by a very detailed report with an awful lot of policy issues to consider. And hence I'm very pleased that Tracy has proposed that it at the moment in this forum, because this is essentially our first sight of it, and it is so detailed and important that we accept the report and thank the officers and take a detailed discussion for further consideration, because I think there will need to be a lot of detailed discussion, to be quite honest. I mean, the reference was to the setup work that we all involved in at Hynham, and an awful lot went in at the beginning from our point of view. As Tracy's pointed out, the world of planning keeps changing. I was rather amused by her remark that this isn't the end of the matter. In my experience as a councillor, I don't think there is such a thing as an end to the matter in planning. But the ground keeps shifting underneath us. But we obviously we seek to establish points of policy with that environment in mind. I'm sorry, I don't want to go on. Thank you, Tracy, and I endorse that amended recommendation to move it to the discussion onto the Leaders Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Tony, you're looking very cosy there with that fire. Do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's significantly warmer here, I'm pleased to say. I'm in danger of agreeing significantly with Rob here. I very much welcome the work that Tracy and the officers have done. It is detailed and it's thorough, and I appreciate that. I would also very much welcome and accept the proposal to send this for more detailed discussions to the leaders group. I think that's the right way forward. There are a couple of elements of emphasis that perhaps I would raise, having discussed this informally with some of my colleagues, and I think that is that we would, in the light of recent times, perhaps emphasise more the opportunities to make this a green and sustainable statement of common ground. And I don't think at the moment we entirely maximise the opportunity to do that. And I would couple that with the elements relating to transport, where we seem a little focused on rail links, when the reality is in Gloucestershire we are a highly rural county, as we all know, and indeed Rob alluded to this earlier with taxis. I think we need to be much more ambitious and thoughtful about how we create transport opportunities for our citizens and our businesses over the next 10 to 20 years. And we do need to be, I think, a great deal more innovative about what the solutions are for personal transport as we move onwards in the 21st century.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I think you got a very good point. Things are moving at pace these days, certainly in terms of the green agenda, and obviously COVID has put a spotlight on a lot of these issues as well. Doina, if you would like to come in.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I think there's a huge amount of work that's already gone into this, so I think we appreciate that we seem to be, getting this coming forward. I mean, having had the response back from our senior planning officers who've obviously inputted, I think overall, for the most part, they're pretty happy with what we've got, and I think it was a good decision that we made, that we employed John Baker to do that work, and I think that's recognised, isn't there, that he's really helped us move on, and we've got this that we didn't have before. I mean, I'm a bit concerned if and I do appreciate that we're going to have a little bit more time. I think like everywhere else, our planning teams are under pressure because of the impact of the restrictions at the moment, so giving a bit more time for that. And like everywhere else, there'll have to be a formal process by which our council can adopt the statement, and I guess that's something that can be discussed as outlined in the next steps. The only thing I'm slightly concerned is we're not going to go back to this again and revisit it all, and I think we need to move on from this now, and if there are further changes, not trying to accommodate them all in this document. I mean, so that would be my only concern, and I'm sort of looking at next steps as opposed to constantly reworking this, because if planning officers feel it's pretty much there is a nice thing at the end which says if there are things we don't agree with, there's a capacity for us to put that in. So that can also be something we might consider, if instead of trying to work it to get a consensus, which might not be possible in certain specific issues. But otherwise, overall, I think we're generally content with it, and very happy that we're going to progress now. So that's good progress to have seen that's happened, bearing in mind all the restrictions we've had over the last year as well.
Terrific. Thank you, Doina. Tracy, did you want to come in with any last comments before we go to the recommendation? Are you still there, Tracy, or
still here? Thank you. Yeah, thank you for those comments, and I think they're all valid comments, and I agree with Councillor Cornell. Actually, the focus needs to be not on starting again, but it needs to be on moving forward. So I would see the discussion with the leaders group and the leaders board, being very much about refining, ready for us to take to council. So I think we should agree that quite early in the kind of conversation with leaders. But I think, for example, the comments that Councillor Dale has made, all valid comments in terms of refining maybe some of the approaches, but the action plan is going to be where the hard work takes place, and I think that's where we will be rolling up our sleeves and very much having detailed conversations. And it may be where we don't agree on some matters, and we may need to understand where the kind of priorities fall in that. So I think the next stage is the leaders board. We can get that set out relatively swiftly, and then we can bring a note back to this group.
Thank you, Tracy. Well, just before we finish this item, I think I'd also like to thank Tracy and the team. This is a fantastic piece of work. And I think we do also need to give John Baker some credit for getting this whole process started and moving along. I think it is a good project, and I think it's like lots of the rest of the agenda. This is about all of Gloucestershire moving forward together. I think there's some good comments there. So thank you very much all. The recommendation is then changed to send this now to the leaders board. As I've not had any comments to the contrary of that, if any of the voting members have an objection, please make yourself heard now. Otherwise, I'll say that the updated recommendation is approved by the committee to go to the leaders board. Is everybody happy with that? Can't see any negatives. Excellent. Okay, so thank you very much, Tracy. We'll now move on then to item number 8, which is the Gloucestershire COVID-19 Economic Recovery Planning Update. And I think we're back to Mike, and maybe Steve Mawson as well might have an input here. And then on the Gloucestershire-wide case, and then I think we'll go to Colin Chick to give us some detail on the county's economic recovery within this. So to start with, Mike, is it you?
I actually thought county officers were going to lead on this, and I was just going to add a little bit in at the end. So,
right, okay.
If Stephen and Colin wanted to go first, that might be helpful to me.
Right. Okay. Is that Steve? Then you come in first, or
I think this is Colin's piece. Yeah.
Give it to Colin.
Are you okay with that? Or
yeah, excellent. You go ahead, Colin.
Okay, right. Since our last GTEC meeting, we have been refining the economic recovery plan to enable us to put forward a costed plan. So effectively, we looked at the action plan at the back, and then had meetings with all the people who put some of those different suggestions forward and costed those proposals up. And that is going to to Cabinet on the 27th of January for approval. And that's quite a lot. It's quite a lot of money. It's basically so divided into the 3 areas that we said we was going to focus on: people, place, and connectivity. We're looking for sort of 150 to 200,000 pounds per annum. On the skills and employment side, somewhere in the region of around 100,000 pounds per annum. And in infrastructure, economy, and growth, around about 130 to let's say 150,000 pounds per annum. So that's about 500,000 pounds a year over the first 3 years of the plan. And so that's what we're going to Cabinet and asking for to drive this forward, to really try and make that difference in those areas. Some of the early work we've already done includes 75k that the county has already put forward into the skills portal, which is something that we started jointly develop with the LEP, and then the LEP are now running with. £100,000 has also been agreed now for the tourism offer to improve tourism in the county through a number of initiatives, and something that we're putting forward as part of the plan and has got indicative approval will be the rolling out of the very successful innovation lab that we've already put in at Colford into 5 further libraries over the next over the rest of this year, which will mean every district will have an innovation lab. In those innovation labs, they will have basically almost everything from particularly from the cyber perspective, to get young people into the way of thinking of digital and cyber. So if you look at as you know very well, Chair, the Colford lab, I mean, literally we have 5-year-olds in there teaching them early number sequencing and programming using caterpillars and things like that, electronic caterpillars. 7-year-olds taught how to build basic, also 10-year-olds taught how to build basic laptops and things like that. For older children or younger people, there's the scanner, the 3D scanner, and 3D printers, which enable them to gain those skills. But also those particular pieces of equipment are used by SMEs and by companies that are in their early stage of development for product development, where they wouldn't otherwise be able to access that sort of equipment to produce their own products. Also rolled out as part of this, obviously, is our training programs. We're working with at Colford already, and we hope to roll this out into others. DWP, who are running courses to skill up young people between 18 and 24 to access jobs. We are then hopefully rolling that out into the other innovation centres. Alongside that will be a strengthened connectivity, both in terms of intellectual property rights, where companies and indeed individuals, but certainly companies, small companies in particular can go to the library and look up patents and things like that to see where the patents are and gain that information at their local library, particularly at the innovative. In fact, all the libraries will be connected in to the main centres, the innovation hubs. So some of that information will be available at all the libraries, but in real detail at the innovation hubs, together with an initiative which will allow people, both companies, small companies in particular, but also individuals maybe looking for jobs with the larger companies, to look up the details of companies and look at the research data, what used to be the old Mintel collection of resource in companies. So all that sort of stuff will be available, actually. So it becomes a real hub in each district for that sort of thing, where we want to try and roll out, where we'll be aiming to roll out things such as our adult education into those areas to enable courses to be run actually locally rather than actually in the centre at Gloucester. Also, as part of the overall programme, we've now moving forward with the Kickstart programme, and that has already, working closely with the voluntary public and private sectors, has nearly got 400 placements since the COVID pandemic, and it targets 16 to 23-year-olds that are on universal credits who are at risk of long-term unemployment. So hopefully you can start to see now that I hate documents that are just strategic policy documents. This is something that's really alive, and we're bringing it to life. And obviously we've got a programme to deliver it now over the next 3 years. So hopefully it gives you a flavour of where we're coming from.
Thank you, Colin. Yeah, and I think there are some really exciting things there. Yeah, I think the innovation hubs that are particularly successful, certainly the Colford one, really is fantastic. And the idea of bringing adult ed into those areas, so it's a more local provision, I think is also very good. Mike, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, it's just a comment really at this point, Chair. It's only a verbal update this time. I'm going to guess that most of the districts in particular have been focusing to a large extent on the response to the pandemic in the periods really since November to now. But that doesn't stop quite a lot of partnership working going across the county to look at response. And indeed, my comment would be generally, we're probably coming to a period now where we really will need to be starting to plan for response collectively. Members will be aware that we agreed a really short range of priorities for the committee on how we would work together, and some of the work that's going on is very much linked to that in terms of recovery. Colin's already mentioned the county's work in terms of skills. That was one of the priorities we identified, and the county were agreed to lead on that. Colin's already mentioned the work to develop skills and talents in young people at all sorts of ages, but there's also work at the moment underway across the county being led by the LEP in terms of developing a county apprentice clearinghouse, and I think Dev's going to mention that a little bit more detail when he updates in the next agenda item. And similarly, there are proposals being worked on and discussed between the finance officers and the LEP at the moment in terms of the potential to pool some of the additional restrictions grants to provide more specific grant aid for businesses in terms of building their capacity in terms of digital engagement. And again, Dev will mention that in his presentation. We mentioned tourism. That was the other priority, and I know that work has continued to be discussed in terms of the partnerships between the DMOs, and I think there's a meeting next week which follows on the funding that the county have given to Visit Gloucestershire, which Dev is leading again. So I think there's a lot of partnership work between the districts and the county and the LEP going on, and I've no doubt in the coming weeks that will be stepped up as we start to move out, hopefully, to recover from this pandemic as we go forward in the county as the vaccination rollout takes place. So just a quick update from me. The work that's going on is very much focused on the committee's priorities, and I think we'll bring you a more detailed report, Chair, to the next meeting in March. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Steve, do you want to come in and...
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was actually not about, for once, I'm not going to talk about finance, would you believe? Obviously, my other role is the chair of the recovery group from the LRF perspective, and that kind of tackles the service side of the recovery base. And as Mike says, I think the challenge for us coming up in the next year is getting our heads around when does recovery start. You know, we are heavily, every authority is heavily involved in response at the moment and focusing rightly on the response-related issues. I think we will have a slightly different challenge from recovery last time. We learned quite a lot of lessons and make it a data-based recovery response. But it will be a different, because we'll have parts of our communities who are covered because of the vaccine, and we will have other parts of our economies and our communities that are not covered more reliantly. So I think it's going to be a really challenging rollout of recovery next time round, and I think we need to bear that in mind when we're looking at the economic recovery and make it an evidence-based one, as we have done so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I think that is the watchword of the scenario we're in, is to keep flexible and keep an eye on things. Things are very fluid and moving very fast, and we're still not certain what it is we're going to have to be recovering from in reality. Does any members of the committee have any questions or comments on our recovery plans? Don't see any hands. No, nobody made the say. So we're asked to comment on progress so far. Shall I say that we're all satisfied with the progress so far? It is a complex issue. There's a long way to go, but I think this is a good, solid start. If we're all happy with that, no other comments. Right, we'll then move on to item number 9, which is the G1st LEP update. And I'll invite Dev Chakraborty to... Dev, there you are. Dev, do you want to present your report?
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Actually, my report should feed in quite seamlessly after Mike's just now. He's teased a few of the items I was going to briefly discuss. Essentially, what we've been looking at prior to Christmas, particularly, it's all revolves around recovery activity, and we came up with the notion of pooling resources across the county via the central government's discretionary grant fund. So I sit on the weekly meetings with all your Section 151 officers. Steve Mawson, Andrew Cummings are on that group. And we've talked about this kind of idea of pooling the resource. Each local authority has had in the region of £1.5 to £2 million from central government. The take up to date has been quite slow, and we've talked in that group a number of reasons. The Christmas period, businesses not really being sure, a little bit of confusion about so many other grants being out there. So the take up across the districts and the boroughs has been roughly about 10% of that allocation. It does have to be spent by March 22, so it is quite a long period of time, and we're conscious of that. But we came up with these 3 ideas that are in my report, helping to get SMEs online, but more importantly, trading online and issuing grants to them. Setting up an apprenticeship clearance house, which is basically a matchmaking service where businesses who are looking for apprentices can directly link via a portal to young people looking to be apprentices and vice versa. And then the third idea was to keep the momentum of Think Gloucestershire, Think Local campaign. So since I've submitted the report to the committee, MHCLG have come back to us, and actually the only one of the 3 they are happy for us to pool is the first one, giving grants to businesses. Essentially, they want that discretionary grant pot. It needs to go directly to businesses. It can't go to the LEP or to other places, which we understand. So we're taking that one forward. And really, I wanted the Joint Committee to be aware of this, because your Section 151 officer may already have spoken to you. I know we've had conversations with I think 3 of the districts so far. But they may well come to you in the next couple of weeks and see whether you're supportive of putting money into that pool. And then the second and the third idea, particularly I think the second, everyone who we've spoken to about the apprenticeship clearance house has said it is a really good idea, particularly for the next generation. It's something that people have said, well, why haven't we had that before in the county? So I think we really want to try and get funding for that, and we're having meetings with the county council. I think it's later today, actually, but also I think we're going to take it to the senior officer group, and we may well bring it back to joint committee as a request from the business rates pool to fund that at the March committee meeting. So really just a heads up on that one. So their ideas in terms of pooling, it's something we're only aware of one other LEP in the country who have come up with this idea to pool the resource. We do think it's a good idea, that first initiative in terms of giving direct grants to businesses right across the patch to get them trading online. And the grants would be evenly split across the 6 districts as well. So no one would be able to say all the money's gone to Gloucester or all the money went to the Forest, wherever. We'd make sure it was split 6 ways. So that's what I wanted to update mainly in terms of my report. The only other one, just to give you a little bit more detail on, is the Visit Gloucestershire campaign. As others have touched on, they are producing a 3-year tourism strategy for the county, and part of the remit is they must engage all 3 of the marketing organisations for the county and the 6 districts as well. And I got an update from Steve Gardner-Collins, who's the chair of Visit Gloucestershire, yesterday. Progress is going well. They've had a number of meetings with districts and the DMOs already. There are workshops set up later this month and in February and March to make sure that everybody has inputted into that. And the plan is still to have that 3-year county-wide tourism strategy ready to share in March this year. So with a little bit of luck, we might have that at the next joint committee meeting as well. Just to reiterate what Mike and others have been saying, there is some really good collaboration work going on across the county right now. And that isn't the same across all areas in the country, that's for sure. So just want to thank everybody for their help. And if anyone's got any questions.
Thank you, Dev. Yeah, I must say that the cooperation and coordination across the county, certainly through this period now, has actually shown that this is the best way forward. And I think we should congratulate all the members for being involved in that. Steve, you've got your hand up. Steve Mawson.
Hold one, Chair, sorry.
Who's the dog out? John McGinty, you've got your hands up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I suppose, just my comment on the issue of pooling the additional restriction grant for this first one. I mean, I'm happy to sort of continue those discussions with the 151s and sort of take these issues back to the councils. I suppose the point I was just going to make is this isn't free money. If we decide to give £3,000 to these businesses to help them get them improve their online service, we may be giving £3,000 to a business that is actually doing all right through the pandemic at the expense of a business that maybe need that £3,000 just to survive the pandemic. So it is going to be a trade-off issue, and I just need to understand a bit more back at the ranch. If we pull £60,000 of our additional restrictions grant into this pot, then that's £60,000 less that I can give to other businesses that may be in more desperate straits than these businesses. So it isn't a straightforward sort of no-brainer, this one. I think we do need to understand the issues and the compromises quite carefully.
I think that's a fair comment, actually, John. And the team who would be pulling this together would be via the Growth Hub. And it wouldn't just be submit a request for the £3,000. There'd be an element of due diligence, and also they'd have to participate in a number of workshops to show that they can justify the need for it. We absolutely agree. This shouldn't go to a business that's thriving right now. We need to make sure that the systems are in place so that it is the most worthy, most needy businesses, for sure. So I agree with that.
Yeah, I would also agree. I think these things do need to be targeted where it is needed most, to make sure that we get as many businesses as possible through this pandemic. I've got one little question on this, maybe a slightly off mark, and I might have to declare an interest in this as well. But there's lots in the news about the 3 million self-employed who are acting as limited companies. And I would put myself in that bracket as well, hence I declare an interest. Do we know, Deb, around the county, how many businesses are impacted by that, whether that has had an impact on them, the lack of support to that particular group?
Yes, absolutely. It definitely has had an impact. I can't give you a stat, unfortunately, in terms of the number of businesses, but it's something when we've put out requests and said to businesses right from the beginning of the sort of lockdown one, which businesses are struggling, where are the gaps that businesses have fallen through in the support. We have constantly been feeding that up through our sort of contacts with BEIS. David and I still have bi-weekly meetings with them, and it's the one area that we keep feeding back. And I honestly don't know the answer why the Chancellor seems to be almost, digging his heels in, that it's an area he doesn't feel is going to be one that any grants are coming, because we keep pushing it, and the response from BEIS is we're hearing that constantly. It is going up the channel right to the top, and the answer still keeps coming back as no, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I do think there are, I would imagine, lots of businesses, certainly in our area, that fall into that category. And I think it is something that we probably need to check out. I would say that I've been fine because I am an online business anyway, so it hasn't impacted me at all. So I would like to say that. But I'm sure there are businesses where that has actually been a bit of a struggle. Doina.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of comments. I mean, I think just on the process, this report was marked for information, but obviously we're being asked to make a decision, and I think really we should be making sure that those things should be highlighted. I would just say a couple of things. I just want to sort of strengthen the point I think was John made around, this money coming from government is really to get cash out the door as quickly as possible to businesses who are in dire straits, and I think that should be our priority. And I think I'm not in a position to endorse this at the moment. I just explained the process by which we've worked throughout the pandemic. Perhaps a bit unusual for other districts, but it's just the nature of the council we are, is all of the discretionary grants, and I think the word discretionary is banned in our council at the minute because it causes so much difficulty for officers to get the right scheme in place. But everything is worked through the 4 political group leaders, and we agree what we feel is appropriate for our district. And we've done a lot of work around the discretionary specifically for that, because there are some businesses that fell through the gaps who were just not getting anything. And we've all had emails from people who are desperate. So one of the examples was the fact that we were excluding anyone who didn't have a business premise, but many successful businesses may work from home, family businesses and all the rest of it. So we specifically put that in. So I'd need to understand this a bit better. What I don't want to do, and I'd echo that point, my preference is to get the money to those businesses who need it, and the discretionary grant enables people who otherwise aren't eligible to get it. If we feel that there's some merit in that, but I certainly have to take it away and discuss it. I couldn't agree it at this point. And funnily enough, you wouldn't expect that, but that I'm probably in agreement with MHCLG that's the right tenor of those grants. And the other thing around the online, we got really successful website that we've been promoting, run by Stroud District Chamber of Commerce. Any business locally who wants to get an online presence can go and list on there for free. And so we've already got that in place right now, which is, you know, responding directly to the pandemic. So that seems to be something that can be done straight away, any business who needs it. This might be a sort of longer term project that we can look at, but I think right now we're right in the midst of the pandemic at the moment. This is just about getting emergency funding out to people, and I think that's where we should be focusing our efforts. But of course, I'm happy to take this discussion away and discuss it with officers, Section 151, and obviously my three other political group leaders. I think I'd be really interested to see how we develop the support for apprenticeships. That's really important to us as a council, and other councils might also be, like, we're following County Council and we've just registered to be a Kickstart gateway, so we're just launching that now. So again, that's another way to help support young people. So that's perhaps one we could explore going forwards.
Just to come back quickly on that one, Doina, we're not asking for a decision now. It is for information purposes only, that you will probably get spoken to via your Section 151 officer in the next. Our next meeting is on Thursday, so I'll feedback that I have now spoken and talked about this at this meeting, and then I'm sure you will be having conversations, but absolutely no decision required today.
Thank you, Dev. I've actually, yes, Councillor Leppington has had his real hand up. Councillor Leppington.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is something that Dev will be aware of, because I spoke to him about it when we had a meeting with him and David Owen on Monday. But I just wanted to register through this committee the disappointment that myself and my cabinet colleagues have that the Growth Hub in the Forest of Dean has still not opened. Dev has said that it is coming to fruition, but I would like to just put it on note, Chair, if I may, because I hope that I'm not going to have to be saying this again when we next meet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Dev, do you want to update it?
Yes, I think, as we mentioned to Richard earlier this week, there have been delays at the Forest of Dean with the Growth Hub through Vantage Point. We're frustrated too. COVID hasn't helped. I would be almost say I'm 99.9% certain, had there not been the COVID pandemic, that would be open now. Progress has been made, and what I've said to the Forest of Dean team is that we'll absolutely keep them abreast. And I got some photos just yesterday, actually, which I'll be sharing with them to show them that it is coming to fruition. And as long as we come out of a lockdown, that will be it is a huge priority for us to get that one open very quickly. But also we did add that the Growth Hub team are working remotely, and they have managed to recruit since December 6 further business guys who can work remotely and can speak to any business who wants support free of charge virtually. So even though the physical Growth Hubs, they're all closed at the moment, the team are still there in the background, and they are really busy as well too, doing a really good job.
Thank you, Dev. And we obviously are quite keen on the Forest Growth Hub as well. And it has been quite a while in the making. In fact, when I was still on the District Council, we were talking about it. So we'll look forward to that coming online soon. Rowena.
Thank you. One of the concerns I've got is that of course, when Dev said, we've got to spend the money by March 22, there's also that concern that we've been told clearly that this is a discretionary grant and it will not be topped up. So we do need to actually balance how we spend that, because there will be people and businesses that will be coming out at the end of this that maybe have done okay until a certain point, but then they struggle later. I'm all for the fact that we should spend it before March 22 rather than have to hand it back. But I think we need to be careful as to the commitment. I know that, and of course, our revenues and benefits teams are running. I mean, I don't know about other authorities, but certainly in ours, we've got four discretionary schemes currently running. alongside each other, which is an awful lot of extra work for those departments. I mean, we're getting the money out, but it's the reporting of it is much more complicated than it needs to be. The one I like the best that we can't do personally is the apprentices clearinghouse. But that's obviously not possible. I'm happy to take this back. I certainly know from Cheltenham's point of view that we've got a policy that actually, when we realised that we weren't able to get the money out as quickly as we wanted to, or we weren't getting the people, and we've worked really closely with the BID and the Chamber, and obviously from it and that's worked. But we've changed the policy again because we gave that facility to ourselves to do that, to include more businesses in that, so that we could distribute more money. So I'm happy to take this back and discuss it further. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Rowena. Right, Steve Mawson, you did have your hand up there. Do you want to come in at all, Steve? Or
no? To be fair, I think Dev covered it. It's to confirm Dinah's issue that this is not a remit under this committee. It's for referral back to districts.
Right, terrific, yes. Okay, there's no more hands up. So, as Dev said, we're not asked to make any decisions today, just to note his report. And we'll follow the progress enthusiastically. Thank you, Dev, for your time today, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Right, we'll move on to item number 10, conscious of time, but this is a decision report that we do need to make today. This is the business rate pool, including the SEDEF funding requests, which is the Strategic Economic Development Fund. And I'll ask Andrew Cummings. Andrew, if you'd like to come in and present the report and the two recommendations, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have a sort of verbal update on the position of the business rates pool, and then I'll pass on to Mike and colleagues to talk about the bids. So the business rates pool, we haven't done sort of a formal sort of round of monitoring since we last met. When we met in November, I believe it was, we had an expectation of 3.8 million as pool growth for the year, and that's still broadly in line with where we think we are. The settlement was actually relatively kind to us in terms of the business rates position. We've talked at great length before about whether there would be a reset of business rates growth coming in 2021, and we now know that isn't. I think theoretically that's still planned for 2022, but I would have some doubts on that. What we do know is coming this year, forget what year I'm in, is government's sort of more fundamental review of business rates as a system for taxation, and that may well have some implications for us. So good news is that there's still, we believe, around £2.3 million unallocated in the Strategic Economic Development Fund at the end of this financial year. Our previous forecasts didn't have any additional growth in for the 21-22 financial year, so we may have slightly more than that, but it remains to be seen. So that's something which we need to bear in mind as we consider these two bids going forward. That £2.3 million balance, because we've got two bids on the table. One from Cheltenham around the Cyber Central project that Tim was talking to earlier, and also a bid sort of led by Tewkesbury to get some funding for the city region work. Something to bear in mind on that one, of course, is that we've already agreed as a committee an allocation of £2 million for the city region. So the bid coming today is within that. So it's essentially for a drawdown of that funding rather than additional new money. So I'll pause there if the committee members have any questions about the sort of business rates position and the pool before I hand over to Mike and the others to present the bids.
Does anybody have any questions for Andrew at this point? Can't see any hands, real or virtual. Okay, who's going to come in on the senior officers then with the recommendations? Mike, I think we've got a minor update on recommendations, haven't we?
And not so much on the recommendations. I just got a slight typo just to point out to to people really on this. And this is I was going to talk to the funding bid to SEDIF for the City Region Board £50,000 allocation to fund the development of a prospectus. Chair, if you would like me to go ahead with that.
Yes, please.
Okay. As Andrew has already said, this is a bid not to the unallocated fund, but a bid for funding to the allocated element of the fund, which is the City Region Board's allocation. I think, Andrew, there's currently around 1.5 million pounds unallocated within that allocation. So there's still a reasonable amount of money in there to draw down from. Leaders who attended the City Region Board will be very familiar with this proposal because the City Region Board did consider the proposal at its last meeting and agreed that this funding bid should be made at this point. So many of the members around the table this morning, Chair, will be aware that about the proposal. The proposal is to produce a prospectus, which is not really to set out a long-term vision for the City Region Board, but simply to advertise the fact that the City Region Board has been established, that it is going to be working to promote Gloucestershire as an economic powerhouse within the Western Gateway powerhouse. It will effectively be a launch document for the City Region Board and set out the offer in a way that Gloucestershire already has. And we've heard this morning about some of the brilliant things that are already going on in Gloucestershire around cyber growth and other business growth generally. And this is about setting that out to what Gloucestershire brings to the table. It will be a document that can be used on social media and on online sources, but that's what it is. What it isn't is going to be is a hard and fast vision for the future of Gloucestershire. That's going to take a lot more time to develop. That being said, when this was considered by the senior officer group, there was a considerable bit of discussion by officers around the fact that just the production of the scope for the prospectus, which will need to go back to the City Region Board for approval, Chair, will help all partners of the City Region to come together to understand what the City Region is and exactly what Gloucestershire is bringing to the table. And so, as well as having the document itself, just the working on it and developing it actually will develop our thinking, our understanding of what Gloucestershire has to offer, as well as helping set that out. And importantly, I think, encourage ownership of all the various partners within the City Region in understanding what we're trying to do here for Gloucestershire economic work going forward. So that's what it is. I don't intend to spend too much time on that. It was supported very much by the senior officer group with that proviso around the need to work together on the scope, and that the understanding of the partners would be helped by that. The project's at its very early stages, Chair, so it's a simple request for an allocation to be available. Tewkesbury Borough Council is simply the body that's making the bid on behalf of everybody else in the city region, in order to just draw down the funding as necessary. And then the final comment was on the senior officer group assessment form. At the very end of that, and the typo I was referring to, it actually says for the reasons set out below, i.e. the senior officer group are endorsing it for the reasons set out below. Unfortunately, that is the last paragraph in the document, so there's nothing else to follow below. What it should have said is above. So apologies to members for that. If you were looking for several more pages of document, they're not there. With that, Chairman, happy to take questions, but I dare say most of the members present will be aware of the discussions at the City Region Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, there is that one type of yes or above. Does nobody's got their hands up? Do we have any questions or comments on this paper and the requests within? Nope. I've just got one very quick question to Andrew before we do move on to the recommendations, slightly separate from the paper, but looking forward. With the pandemic and things like business rates, holidays and all the rest of it, do you know what sort of impact that's likely to have down the road?
Thanks, Chair. I think the short answer to that question is no. So what's really interesting is that when the government made the settlement, they said that they hadn't made any decisions around how many of those reliefs and discounts were going to continue into the next financial year. And I think we're expecting that to come in the March budget, of course, which creates an interesting position for businesses and also for councils. It actually sort of helps our budgeting position in some ways, because as we've talked about before, when government introduced these discounts, as authorities, we get a grant to cover it. What it does, though, is it really masks what the real picture is on how businesses are doing and their ability to pay business rates, because huge numbers have had no bill at all in the last financial year. And what we don't know is whether they would have been able to pay one if there is one. So that picture will probably begin to unfold over the next few months. And I know all the districts are monitoring very carefully the impact of that. One of our sort of early warning indicators, if you like, is what's called empty property discount, where businesses can apply and say their premises are empty. That has risen across the county, obviously with regional differences, but not significantly so. So it's a really good question, Chair, and we'll be monitoring that very carefully, and we'll feed that back into not only the business rates pool, but a lot of the economic recovery work that's going on as well.
Thank you, Andrew. Steve, did you want to pick up that?
I guess for me, Chair, and I know the relative district and county bodies are lobbying on this. It also points out how unsustainable the business rate system is into the long term. At the first sign of economic difficulty in the pandemic, government had to step in and start giving the local government a lot of extra money. That means it's not a sustainable model for me, and definitely needs, well, I wouldn't say tinkering, but some major work on the future proposals about how we make it a sustainable funding model for local government. And hopefully when we get that consultation as part of the fair funding review and business rate review later on in the year, we'll start to see a radical change from what we currently have. So I think that for me, it put the writing on the wall that this is no longer a sustainable model.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree, and certainly where things like high streets are involved as well these days, things have changed drastically. Okay, I don't see any more hands. If anybody's happy, so the recommendations are to consider the two set of funding requests for a City Region Board and City Region Prospectus, and for cyber and digital growth in Gloucestershire. Are we all happy to agree those requests?
Chair, sorry, just to be clear, you're only considering the City Region Board request at the moment, because Tim's going to present the requests for the cyber funding. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you for that clarity, Mike. Are we all happy with that recommendation, or the revised recommendations? Everybody's nodding. Nobody against. Make yourself known now. Happy to accept from Richard. Great. Right, on that basis, we're happy to accept those recommendations. So, Andrew, if you could take that away. And thank you very much for all your work on that sector. Right, we'll move forward. We've got the work plan. It's been published. Do we have any comments or updates? Mike, you're looking like you're coming in.
Chair.
Sorry, Chair. As I say, I thought that the approval of the funding was simply for the City Region Board 50,000 that you've just approved. There is still the funding application to be discussed, which follows the expression of interest for funding, which is for the cyber 200,000, which we haven't yet discussed, which Tim needs to speak to, Chair. So
right, sorry. Okay. Right, sorry.
Apologies,
Tim,
Chair.
That's okay. So, right, we've got the first bit. We need to go to the next bit then. Tim, do you want to come in on the 200K?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So yeah, well, we covered, and I think as a slight confusion, the presentation made earlier with colleagues covered quite a lot of the points that are set out in this funding bid, because it was about the importance of the county-wide approach and some of the benefits to growth and us to be able to maintain that momentum, but put a little more structured governance around that and enable us to really develop that compelling narrative from an inward investment point of view and also from a sort of a Gloucestershire-wide perspective. So as we set out in the paper that's in front of you, it sets out what we're trying to achieve, what the strategic fit is, and then also what some of the outputs of that might be. And they are broken down, and I've put the word circa next to the estimations of what these elements will cost. They're not exact proposals, they're estimations. And our proposal is that we be reporting back to the officer group and bring back regular updates to the growth committee, because we do think it's pretty important about how this is progressing, because it is progressing at pace. Just make sure that everyone's on board with that. So as I say, we have done most of those elements have been covered in the presentation made. So what I would suggest is I would then hand over to you, Chair, just to take any specific questions before you take this to the vote. Okay.
Okay, so specifically on the item for the 200,000, do we have any questions or comments? Dev and then Rob Bird. Dev.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question, just really wanted to, 100% support this request. I think the analogy I've used before is it's like a hot air balloon. A lot of organisations and people and the Joint Committee have put funding into developing the cyber sector, and it is the county's USP right now. And we just to keep that momentum going and keep the energy going in the hot air balloon, I think is really important. Having people like Reed, seconded from GCHQ, and Nick Sturge is fantastic. They've been doing a lot of work with the LEPS cyber group. They've been presenting to the LEP board as well in terms of the ecosystem right across the county. So I just wanted to throw in from the LEP's point of view, we're totally supportive of this one.
Thank you, Dev. Rob.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to check about how this funding was going to be monitored in effect, and comments made when we had the earlier presentation about cyber central, and John McGinty made some comments about cyber strategy, and I think Mike Dawson made some comment there about relating now therefore to this item and how the progress of the use of the funding would be monitored. Could I just check where we got to with that before we come to a decision?
Yeah, Rob, I think the proposal is that we'd be reporting back and in effect reporting through the senior officer group and then be preparing updates as to sort of what progress we made on the different work streams that were identified there. And I think we can agree a sort of drawdown mechanism as we have with the last amount of money that we did, just to do that in sort of a number of phases, just so that we're able to sort of be monitored against, you know, what we're actually doing with those different work streams. So that was the intention. And you know, obviously, you know, we're quite keen to actually come and report back, not too regularly, but just, you know, just to give some consistency, so you don't get bored of it, but just to give you some idea about how we're progressing, and you know, just an indication that this is, you know, this is representing value for money for the wider Gloucestershire.
I mean, I think that is a very good point. We do need to keep tabs on the sort of money, make sure we are getting the best bang for our buck, as it were. Mike, do you want to come in?
I'll bow to Colin first, if Colin wanted to comment, Chair.
Yeah, Colin.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you, Chair. Really just want to pick up some of the comments really that I raised really at the senior officer group, and John McGinty actually reflected today. I think, you know, in principle, I have problems with the bid. What I have a problem with at the moment is that the lack of clarity as to the outcomes and outputs that will be achieved from it, i.e. measurable, you know, smart type targets. And also, bear in mind, you know, this is the second year that we've been asked for £200,000 again. And what there isn't as part of this is an exit strategy. And I think otherwise it just keeps going and go. These sorts of bids could keep going and going and going. You know, oh, we need, you know, X, we need Y, whatever. And I think what we really need to do is this needs to be maybe agreed in principle and go back to SOG to have clearer outputs and outcomes and an exit strategy. So we have got measurable deliverables that we can test the performance out against for the future, and also enable the committee to be able to see exactly what the performance is like and whether those outcomes and whether those outcomes have been achieved and what they've got for their money. Because bear in mind, this is the second year, so this is £400,000 now, and I just think, you know, we need to have that clarity. We should on any project, not just this one, but all projects should have that level of clarity when asking for funding. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, so in answer to that, so firstly, I think you know, in terms of the response about reporting back for the previous, I mean, we've done a report back to this committee, which was very clear. We've done we've also been to the scrutiny committee about that. So I feel there has been, you know, quite a clear report back on what the successes and what the outputs of that first piece of work was, of which everyone all agreed that was very positive. So in terms of the measuring the measurables of this, again, on the final part of this bid, I think we do try to set out quite clearly what those work streams are and in effect what you're going to get for it. Very happy, as we said, to report back into the SOG group, just to report back on the progress against them. A lot of this is about keeping the resource, the specialist resource, and the links that we're doing in terms of the conversations we're having with government, the conversations we're having with big business, and the opportunity that we've got with the specialist team, how we support that through the work that we're doing with the LEP, the cyber leadership board, and all those aspects that at the moment Cheltenham are predominantly funding, of which we're very keen to because we've got a direct interest in it. But there's a lot of effort that goes into extending this out and benefiting and working with all the districts, because there's quite a number of different bodies, and we have assets and really important activities going on that spread across the whole of Gloucestershire. So I'm keen to move on with this and not delay this, and I do think we have set out quite clearly what those deliverables are, but more than happy to just do that continued reporting back on progress. So that's how I think is the best way to move this forward.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Colin, Mike, did you want to comment?
Yeah, just to pick up on that, Tim's absolutely right. There is quite a lot of governance already around the cyber project. I think one of the issues is around the wider Gloucestershire issues that this £200,000 is aimed at. Tim's already mentioned that he was, at least I thought he mentioned, that he was happy to have the same sort of arrangements that we put in place for the first £200,000, and that initially was that the SOG would approve the general project process, monitor that progress, and then Tim would report back in due course to the joint committee on approval on the outcomes. So if Tim was happy to accept that is what happened last time, that SOG approved Tim's detailed project, although Tim, to be fair, has I know this is a second iteration of the expression of interest, and I know Tim's put quite a bit more detail in to this one. So if SOG if the approval of the £200,000 is just down to some detailed a bit more detailed approval of the project plan, and then the monitoring with Tim and his team, we could go forward with that. I think the area where we might need to have some more discussion is listening to the comments this morning is around the digital strategy, because clearly, I know Tim wants to get on with that, but there's clearly some issues around what that would look like, what it covers, how it works. So I think, Tim, that there's a £20,000 element in the £200,000 which relates to the digital strategy. I would perhaps suggest that also be subject to the senior officer group approval, and then the senior officers can at least discuss how that will go forward, and be clear across the county how that can then be delivered. And I'm sure the chief execs would probably want some input into that discussion as well. But through the senior officer group, we probably can do that. It's just at the moment that if we approve the £20,000 for the digital strategy, there's not a lot of detail behind that at the moment in terms of what that would be. But if it's a Gloucestershire digital strategy, we'd all have to be happy that it was moving in the right direction for the whole of the county. And I think there's some work to do to scope that at the moment. But that would be my suggestion. Other people may have different suggestions on the process, Chair, but at least at that point, Tim won't have to wait until the next committee. He can get on with the senior officer group to get the details hammered out, and then we can monitor them as we go forward, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. That does seem like a very sensible approach, and certainly mirroring what we did last year. Steve, do you want to come in, Steve?
I support that approach from Mike, Chair, because I think there is some work to be done on the digital strategy, and certainly from the County Council perspective, this is where John's coming in as a double hatter in some respects. We've had discussions about turning the nice words into actions. And I think we also need to think about what each district may want to do that might be in line with the strategy, but slightly, if you like, giving them freedom to operate in their own space. So there's that. This is what we're doing for everybody, but some other districts and county might be doing something slightly different for different groups or different individuals. So I think there is a bit of work to be done like that, and I'm happy for the senior officer group to take that a bit away. But overall, happy for the approval to go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
So, Chair, can I just come back? I think it's important. The digital strategy part of this, happy to have a more detailed discussion. As I say, the whole intention there is to get momentum to move this forward and completely take on board what and happy, to allow others to lead that, because in my view, the leadership of that should really be somewhere else. So it's great that we've had the discussion. We're moving this forward. I don't want to get too drawn into then the depth of requirement to actually move this and approval to move this forward. I don't want to spend the rest of time talking about what we're going to deliver when I think on some of the other strands it's relatively straightforward. But happy to go to the SOG to work that out, and let's detach that element about the digital strategy. I just want momentum on it, so that would be great.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. I think you're absolutely right. Momentum is key. We can't be held this up. We can't spend our entire time discussing. However, I think there is a very good point for the SOG to take on board and work through the detail and the nitty-gritty to make sure that we're actually moving in the right direction. The money is being well spent. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. I think working all together, we can make this work. So, got no more comments or people asking to speak. So, on that basis, are the committee then happy to accept the request for the 200,000 on the basis that it actually then it does go through the SOG to iron out some of the detail and look at the digital strategy side of things? Is everybody happy with that? I'm sure we'll get a better recommendation written out than what I just said, but the essence of it, I think, is there. If we're all happy with that, see a few nodding heads. Terrific. Okay, we'll take that as agreed. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, officers. Our next thing is the forward plan. Do we have any comments or updates on the forward plan at all? Nope. Good. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. It's for me then to say thank you to everybody. The future meetings are 10th of March and then 9th of June, which will possibly be, depending on whether elections happen and things, could be a new meeting, a new committee. Doina, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, I was trying to come in on the forward plan, but I didn't quite get there.
All right, sorry.
I just find it a bit curious. We managed to get through this whole meeting talking about economic growth without mentioning the B word, i.e. Brexit. And I just thought at some point, shouldn't we just take a snapshot, and without getting into the politics of it, just to feel what potential impact it has or hasn't had? And that's perhaps where the LEP might be able to assist us. You know, what's the intelligence they're getting back? I just thought it might be interesting for this committee just to get a view as to what's going on, just for information and going forwards, anything that we may need to consider.
I think that's a very good point, Doina. Dev, is that something you can take away? And Mike?
Definitely. From the LEP's point of view, I mentioned earlier the 6 new business guides the Growth Hub team have employed. Well, 3 of them are dedicated purely for EU transition activity. So by the time of the next meeting, we could pull together quite a decent report of, the types of queries they're having and the number of queries they're having. And probably me present it, but I might bring Sarah Danson from the Growth Hub Network to the meeting as well.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Dev. So, Laura, perhaps we can add that to the agenda.
Well, we've been on the meeting. I did just get the emails through about webinars and stuff, assistance that's coming up through the Growth Hub from that team. So, yeah, something around that would be really interesting.
Brilliant. Excellent. Mike.
I was just going to add to Doina's query. The chief execs had a quick discussion yesterday afternoon around the impact on our own services of Brexit and whether we were getting huge amounts of inquiries. The general feeling was, I know the chief execs might wish to comment, but the general feeling was things were relatively quiet at the moment. We will see how things develop, but we did undertake to actually have a discussion with Dev and let colleagues about their experience as well. So we'll join in with the future item on that. Thank you, Chair.
Terrific. Thank you, Mike. Okay, so I think that's it, everybody. Thank you very much to all the officers. Thank you to Laura for setting it all up and running it so well. Thank you to all the members for coming along. And I look forward to seeing you all in March. Thank you very much and goodbye.